At long last, Lucasfilm reveals the future of the Star Wars franchise. There's 10 new projects, 9 new Star Wars shows, and an all-new Star Wars movie in 2023. Oh, and by the way, The Mandalorian came out yesterday, but that kind of flew under the radar. All that and more here on Chatooine. Well, welcome back to Chatooine, everyone. I'm your host, StarWarsOnly, joined with the Goldman. Our buddy Lunga is busy. He's got a comic book coming out. I think it's the Isidore and the Immortal Chains comic book, if I recall.
Yes, I believe.
We have the link for it in the description if you guys are interested in pre-ordering that, supporting Lunga and our friends. But welcome back to Chatooine, everyone. We always talk about the news, the topics in the fandom, and simply chat about Star Wars. If you have any questions for us, make sure to leave them in the live chat or send a super chat so your question can be guaranteed an answer before the show is over. And we're also on Spotify and everywhere else you listen to podcasts, so check us out there. But let's start off the week and the news with the biggest news of the week. I mean, there's so much that happened this week.
We're going to start this so much.
Yeah, there's a lot to get to. But I think the biggest one is the Rogue Squadron announcement. And I feel like this almost was kind of sidelined with a lot of other Star Wars news. But I really feel like this was the big one in terms of the future of the franchise. This is something that I didn't see coming. I did not think that we were going to have a Rogue Squadron movie, let alone it wasn't going to be Taika Waititi who's making it. I really thought that he was going to be the next Star Wars director, and it's this lady named Patty Jenkins. She's the next Star Wars director. Do you know anything about her?
Patty Jenkins, yeah, she directed Wonder Woman, and she's directing the one that's coming out this Christmas. And I loved Wonder Woman. Very much looking forward to the new one. And I was very surprised to hear her be announced as the director, because there was a lot of the projects that were announced were somewhat rumored before, like Lando, an Ahsoka show, the Rangers of the New Republic. Looks like it's going to be the one with Cara Dune, but we'll see. But no one knew that it was going to be Rogue Squadron for a movie. So yeah, that completely surprised me, and I'm excited for it. I wouldn't say I'm like super hyped, but I mean, it's Rogue Squadron. It has a ties to some of the books, some of the video games. My hope is that it's going to take place after the Rise of Skywalker. Like, based off the image here, it looks like that's the T-65 X-Wing, which is the one from the original trilogy. So it looks like it's going to take place after Episode 6. But it's weird because, they just came out with Squadrons, which was a fighter pilot video game after Return of the Jedi. There's a bunch of books that take place after Return of the Jedi. So just for, I guess, making the expanding the time periods a little bit and not just exploring right around the original trilogy, I think it would be cool if it was after Episode 9, but I wouldn't complain either way. What do you think?
I'm on the fence because I don't know much about Rogue Squadron. Yeah. I know about the timeline. I know that it's started by Luke, and Wedge Antilles is involved in it. I'm okay with the director choice. Like you said, I liked Wonder Woman, the first movie directed by her. I didn't love it, but I do think it is arguably the best DC film that has come out under the new universe that they've been making and whatnot. There's some problems I had with it, but I think we all knew this was coming eventually. For a very long time, Kathleen Kennedy and the executives at Lucasfilm have talked about putting a female director in the helm of a Star Wars movie. And so this makes sense to me. I do think it's a little interesting of a choice on the title, and kind of, I really thought we were going to start a new trilogy. And this makes me feel like the next two Star Wars films, if we're doing a 2023 and a 2025 Star Wars film, which is in the works at the moment, I feel like neither of those are going to be trilogy films. I really feel like this is going to be its own little standalone film, not like Rogue One and not like Solo, in the sense of it's on a specific character or it's on a specific mission or pinpoint in the Star Wars universe. I really think it's going to be about different characters, and it's going to be an interesting story that for some reason turned into a film. And then in 2025, we're getting Taika Waititi's Star Wars film, and that will also be its own little standalone adventure. And then who knows what's happening with the 2027 Star Wars film. It's just, This one really did catch me off guard, but in
Mhm.
a good way. I think it's a good surprise, and I also think it's kind of good to say that we talked about on the show for a little bit, and I know I covered it on my channel about a Rogue One spin-off show, an animated series, or Rogue Squadron, my bad. And it
Yeah,
turns out it was an actual movie. Like, no, there's so many projects that Lucasfilm announced that were really well like hidden and kept under wraps in terms of
definitely.
secrets. So this was one of them, and I think this is surprising, but I also think it's a good choice, and I'm very curious to see how this does in the box office.
Yeah. One thing, it's the smallest thing that bothers me because it looks like it's going to be a standalone movie. Based off what they described as Taika Waititi's film, because they didn't reveal what his film was, but they said it's going to be something you've never seen before. We can assume it'll release in 2025. I doubt this will be like a Rogue Squadron sequel. I feel like they would have said that. So I think they're going to do maybe these next three films, they're going to be like their own side stories. And it looks like they're abandoning the A Star Wars story title if it's just called Star Wars Rogue Squadron, which is fine with me, I guess. But I think the interesting thing about this movie is the description that Kathleen Kennedy gave. She said that this film is going to explore I think it's like a future era in the Star Wars timeline, which makes me think, is it after Episode 9? But again, the X-wing and just the nature of the lore, both in the expanded universe and in the canon, have Rogue Squadron during the original trilogy. So yeah, it could be either or. Either or I'd be fine with. I prefer it if it was after Episode 9, just because that's a fresh time period and they're not really handicapped by the events of the canon with like the Battle of Jakku and stuff. But I think that's all the information we've gotten about this movie, other than that's going to be directed by Patty Jenkins and will release in 2023. But yeah, it was definitely a nice surprise. This pleased a lot of people. I'm not a big fan of like the fighter pilot aspect of Star Wars, but I'm not going to complain. I mean, I was surprised of all these stories they made this one the movie. But I guess if you're going to have a big battle, then why not do something like Rogue Squadron? So yeah, I'm not upset by any means. Like if they announced the next movie was going to be like a Lando movie, then maybe I'd be a little annoyed.
Mhm.
But Rogue Squadron, I'm perfectly fine with.
Yeah, I'm gonna reserve judgment until the movie
Mhm.
actually comes out. I feel like this is going to be something in between an episodic film, but also like taken more seriously than the Solo spinoff story and Rogue One. I do
Mhm.
feel like there's a lesson to be learned from Solo Star Wars story as well, where like this film is just called Rogue Squadron, but a lot of the names for the upcoming shows and series that we'll be talking about in a minute were all just the names of the characters. You know, you have Andor, you have Lando, you have
Mhm.
other specific Ahsoka. I mean, they're all
Yeah.
just the names. The title is just the name, and I feel like that was set with Solo Star Wars story. So I feel like I didn't like Solo. I don't think it was awful, but I definitely don't think it deserved to be a Star Wars movie. But I think Lucasfilm and us as an audience really learned a lot from that, and I think it's going to
Mhm.
be kind of one of those laying the foundations for the future of the franchise. But what are your thoughts on the Taika Waititi Star Wars film? Because one thing that someone noticed on Twitter, I think it was Jordan Mason, one of the Star Wars scoopers, was that in the background, I wish I had a picture of it. In the background of it, Kathleen Kennedy talks about it. There's like this, like that, the basically the shape of the planet Mortis that
Mhm.
Anakin, Ahsoka, and Obi-Wan ran into, and then it was all that same shape is also on the book cover of Dawn of the Jedi: Into the Void. So, do you think that he's going to do something like absurd? Like he's going to go to Mortis, he's going to explore something about the
Mhm.
Force, because they don't just put that in there for nothing, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I would I would totally be down for that. And they did describe it. I don't remember the exact words, but when you describe something like she said something like they're gonna do something they've never done before, they're really gonna let Taika explore his vision. And what way to do that than like something that's really out there? I'd prefer something like Dawn of the Jedi. I've never read the book, but apparently it wasn't that good. But just using those concepts, because that's like way in the past, like more
Mhm.
than like maybe 100,000 years before, like when the Jedi were using I think they're called proto sabers. Like back then, the lightsabers
Yeah.
were attached to a backpack. I would be down for that. Maybe that's going to be the start of a new trilogy. It's possible. Maybe Taika directs the first one and then hands it off to someone else. But I mean, after the sequels, maybe probably not going to do that. Um, Maybe it'll just be a one-off story of the Dawn of the Jedi. I would be fine with that. It looks like maybe what could be happening is because if you look at all these shows, with the exception of the High Republic, they're all taking place, it looks like, after Revenge of the Sith and like during the Mandalorian period. So that's only about like a 20-year time period. Besides the Acolyte, which we'll talk about in a bit. So maybe with like the shows and stuff, they're going to focus on that. And then if the movie, because they said the Rogue Squadron is gonna start off a new era of Star Wars, maybe they're gonna do something not exactly like the MCU, but where they have like the shows are gonna fill out one era, and then over time the movies are gonna fill out a different era, like after the Rise of Skywalker. Like maybe the first movie in this new era just happens to be Rogue Squadron, and it's like a future Rogue Squadron, whatever, how many years after Rise of Skywalker, and then in maybe Taika's movie in 2025 that's really weird, has to do with maybe Jedi going to like Mortars or something. Maybe it's not Dawn of the Jedi. And then after that, 2 years later, it's another story, and then there's maybe some sort of like culmination Avengers type story. I could see them doing that, especially if it does well with the shows. But yeah, I think that would be a very interesting direction for the future of Star Wars to go in.
I think we have a lot of options now, which is something we didn't have when Disney initially bought Star Wars, because it was like, we have to make 7, 8, 9. We have to fill that gap. And now we have this timeline between 6 and 7, that 30-year gap that the Mandalorian's kind of exploring, but not too much. We have this gap between, and there's no more gaps actually at that point. There's just, after episode 9, you have like limitless possibilities.
Anything.
Before episode 1, you have limitless possibilities. So it's a very good time to be a Star Wars fan. It's a very good time to tell stories in the Star Wars universe. I want to address the super chat we got before the show even started. Thank you, Elijah. He says, I love how Mando quoted Moff Gideon's line exactly from season 1. And he's talking about the new episode of The Mandalorian, chapter 15, The Believer. He says, it's like poetry. They rhyme. And what are the top 3 shows you're looking forward to the most out of the 9 announced? I'll give mine. My number 1, and we'll talk about each one as we get into the rest of the show. My number 1 is actually the Acolyte. My number 2 is probably, I would say Obi-Wan. And yeah, there's a lot of good ones. And I guess my number 3 would, there's some tough competition, but my number 3 is probably going to be the Ahsoka one, just because of the timeline that one is in. But yeah, number 1's the Acolyte, and I'll explain more about that later. But yeah, that's my top 3. What about you?
I would definitely have the Acolyte as number 1, just because of not only the nature of the show, because they said they're going to focus on like the dark side aspect, which is something we haven't seen before besides in books, where a story will focus on the dark side specifically, and the fact that it's going to take place during the tail end of the High Republic. Which I would assume means the Sith, because whatever the High Republic, how long it is, that means you're somewhat approaching the Phantom Menace. So maybe you'll get that Darth Plagueis-esque story. I doubt we'll get actually Darth Plagueis in it, because that would still be a little less than 200 years before the Phantom Menace. But maybe this really creepy Sith story that I would be really interested in. So yeah, the Acolyte would be number 1. I'm a little annoyed because I think I have the same order that you do. Obi-Wan would be number 2, and then Ahsoka would be 3. One thing I don't like, I find it funny, but you pointed this out, how a decent amount of the shows, they're just like the names of people, but they're kind of inconsistent. Like Solo is the last name, Lando is the first name, then they have Obi-Wan Kenobi, which is the full name. They have Ahsoka, which is the first name, Andor, which is the last name. So I just find that hilarious. It's not a big deal, but it's just a little nitpick.
So when they make the Qui-Gon Jinn show, it's just going to be Jinn.
like that. Jinn, a Star Wars show. No, yeah. That'd be funny. But yeah, that would be my order. The Obi-Wan show would be number 2, and I'd say the Hayden Christensen announcement made me more excited. I think it made me more happy than excited, just because I know how many people want to see Hayden back. So I think I'm more so happy for them. I'm a little nervous story-wise, because it looks like they're gonna somewhat retcon the intention of Vader's line in New Hope.
Yeah.
We haven't seen you since blank. Like the implication is that it was since Mustafar and Revenge of the Sith. So now they're playing loosey-goosey with the dialogue, which doesn't bother me. They just have to be very careful in what they do. Does Vader know Obi-Wan is still alive after the show? It looks like that will be the case. He can't know about Luke at all, so it's probably not going to take place on Tatooine. But they're going to fight. and I assume we're gonna get like some sort of flashbacks, which makes me excited because if you cast Hayden Christensen as Darth Vader, but you never show his face, then it's kind of a wasted casting because you're not going to use Hayden Christensen's voice while he's in the Darth Vader suit, unless there's like
he's not going to take the helmet off.
Yeah, so it looks like they're going to do flashbacks, and maybe they'll use Ahsoka too. Although I'm not sure how good a 45-year-old Rosario Dawson would play a 17-year-old Ahsoka, but we'll see. But yeah, there's a lot to be excited about. The only thing I'll say that I don't say made me upset, but I was disappointed was the announcement of a Lando show. I just have absolutely zero interest in that show. I'm gonna watch it. But the interesting thing is they didn't put Donald Glover's name next to the show. Like with the Ahsoka show, names. Yeah, with the Ahsoka show, they said Rosario Dawson will be playing Ahsoka. But yeah, they didn't say Lando, whether it be Billy D. Williams or Donald Glover. I think it would be weird if they brought in a third person. Like if they're going to do you can't do a show that just surrounds Billy D. Williams. If it's like where he's narrating it and there's like flashbacks to Donald Glover, that could work. But if you bring in a third actor, like a new young person, because Donald Glover doesn't want to do it, I think that would turn off a lot of people because it's just like, do you really want another recast? I wouldn't want that. So yeah, what are your thoughts on some of the other shows that aren't on the top of your excited list?
It's a weird situation for me because I feel like I need a little bit more details. For me, the Cassian Andor series, I have built a little bit more excitement for that, surprisingly. Like that is the one that I did not like it when the announcement came out. I just haven't liked it in general. And actually, when they announced about it, I was like, oh, okay, I can kind of get on board with it a little bit more. For me, Rangers of the New Republic is the one that is a little more interesting in terms of exploring that new timeline in that new era. And it makes me wonder what they're going to do with the kind of sequel timeline in general. And speaking of which, Gamerman, thank you for the super chat. He says, do you think if we ever see Rey again, she will go by Rey Skywalker or she won't go by Rey Skywalker and just be called Rey? I know you're a big Rey fan. I think she's always going to be Rey Skywalker now. And I do think that we will inevitably see Daisy Ridley reprise her role as Daisy or as Rey in the future, probably like 20 years, maybe it's 15 years from now, but not anytime soon.
Yeah, I would love to see her again. My ideal hope is in a animated series because I'm realistic. I don't think Daisy Ridley is going to come back anytime soon, and I want to see a younger version of Rey wandering about. So I prefer an animated series about that. But yeah, they can't ignore the Rey Skywalker thing. Like she adopted the name, whether you like it or not. That's part of the continuity. And whether or not I like or dislike a decision that a story in Star Wars has made, I would hate it even more if it was completely forgotten or even straight up retconned. Things like with the midichlorians, right? They just mentioned M count a few weeks ago, so they're not just completely discarding that aspect of the lore. With Palpatine and the Rise of Skywalker, I'm not a big fan of it, but if they never address that again, that would be in stories after Episode 9. That would somewhat bother me because you're just that basically is saying that they don't like the story. Lucasfilm does not like the Rise of Skywalker, and they're going to do whatever they can to ignore it. So I don't want them to do that. But yeah, I hope we see Rey again, and if we do, I would be certain that she would go by Rey Skywalker.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. But let's get into the actual shows and the series and go not one by one, but kind of go through the big ones and the announcements. And also at the end of the show, I'm going to show everyone the official thumbnail for my documentary coming next week. So if anyone's interested in that, stick around to the end and I will show that. But the first show that we have to talk about is the Bad Batch animated series that is coming in 2021. So let's take a look at the trailer for it real quick.
The Republic will be reorganized into the First Galactic Empire!
quite an impressive display.
Looks good.
Looks action packed. It looks exactly like I would expect for a like Clone Wars spin-off series. I think personally, my prediction for this is still that it's coming out in spring of 2021, and the only reason I say that is because the DLC for the Legos Star Wars Skywalker Saga, there's a DLC for that coming in spring of 2021 for the Bad Batch series, and they said it's coming in 2021, so I would imagine that would come out in spring, and then we'd have the Boba Fett series coming out later in the year, like maybe summer and maybe even fall. And then Mandalorian season 3 comes out in holiday of 2021. But what are your thoughts on the Bad Batch so far?
It basically looks like a season 8 of Clone Wars, which is fine with me. I mean, I'm the way they even treated this trailer, or at least when they were announcing it, is that this is really a Clone Wars spinoff. Because, like it originally had the Clone Wars logo and then it transitioned into the Bad Batch. So it looks like they're going to explore the galaxy right after Revenge of the Sith, which is fine with me. I'm somewhat interested in that, just seeing how the clones handle everything. Like some maybe remnants of the Clone Wars. It was like when a war ends, it doesn't just... The fighting doesn't stop everywhere. Maybe there's still some pockets of separatists out there that are still doing stuff. So it could be very interesting. I would bet money we would see Ahsoka and Rex at some point. And I think, and this is just a guess, I would guess that the inhibitor chips on these clones just didn't work with Order 66, because Order 66 basically made clones into droids that just don't have a personality really. And you can't make a show around clones without a personality, especially these guys. So I would bet that they weren't affected by Order 66, and they're just trying to make their way in a post-Republic Rise of the Empire galaxy. One thing you mentioned, they didn't announce a Boba Fett show. I'm not sure if that's even going to happen. Maybe the Boba Fett will be part of the Rangers of the New Republic. That's because they haven't announced any like actors in that. The thought that I think a lot of people have is that Cara Dune would be in that, because of the like last scene that we got in the I think it was the 4th episode of this season. So I would be surprised if she wasn't in it. Maybe Boba Fett's in it, and that's what maybe this is the Boba Fett project that people heard reports about. It's just not called Fett, a Star Wars story. So I could see that, and if that is, if it would make me much more inclined of the series, because I'm not interested in Boba Fett. But if he was part of a team like the Rangers, whether it be Cara Dune, Fennec Shand, and some other people we probably don't know, I would be much more interested in watching that.
Yeah, I do think it was interesting that they didn't say anything about Boba Fett. I think one of the reasons that is because they probably are waiting till the end of season 3 of The Mandalorian for that to happen, because maybe it takes place after it, maybe it takes place before. I believe it's still going to happen, just because a lot of extremely credible people have said it is filming as we speak. I also know someone who is not like involved with the production, but is very close to that situation, who did confirm like, yeah, that's going to happen, but didn't give any details. Just I talked about it, and they're like, yeah, that's going to be great, basically. And so I think it's going to be a very interesting show. I don't know when they would announce it. I think the idea of them just dropping a random Boba Fett show out of nowhere on Disney Plus, no marketing for it, no announcement, just one day you wake up and everyone's like, oh, did you see like Boba Fett's on the Disney Plus? Like, I think that would be kind of groundbreaking in terms of a lack of marketing, but a big surprise for the Star Wars fandom. But who knows? I think we'll have more.
That'd be interesting.
I think we'll have more answers next Friday when season 2 ends. But
probably sometime around there.
Who knows? We know that the Bad Batch series, I think some of the details came out from those Kessel Run Transmissions guys, is that the villain of that is going to be Commander Cody, and he is going to be like in the trailer. There's clones, former clones with like all black armor, meant to take away their individuality and make them just kind of look like droids, as you were saying, without those inhibitor chips. The Bad Batch are kind of their own guys, but with the inhibitor chips, all the clones are now kind of droid-like and just kind of have no personality. So I have never been excited for the show too much, just because I didn't like their arc. but I think the premise of the story of them dealing with the fall of the Republic and the beginning of a new empire and seeing where they fit in, I think that's very interesting. And I think that's where this show kind of catches my attention. That's what a lot of these series so far have done for me, is that maybe not these specific characters or the concept interest me, but the timeline in the story that they're trying to tell is something that I'm willing to see play out, if you will.
Yeah, the concept of this show is definitely the most intriguing for me. Just the galaxy after Revenge of the Sith, because that's a big, if Star Wars was real life, shifting like the style of your government's a big deal. So I would like to see the ramifications of that play out. In the characters, not so much. Maybe Darth Vader could show up if the Bad Batch is still kind of working for the Empire. I'd assume they're working for the Empire at the beginning. I mean, we did see one of them just talking to Tarkin. So that'd be cool if we saw Vader not as a protagonist, but someone that's working alongside our main characters. That would be interesting. Yeah, the characters don't interest me too much, but they can grow on me. I'm definitely gonna watch this show. I wonder how long it would go, because they haven't really mentioned some of the other shows they mentioned. It would be like a limited series. Like I think they said Lando would be a limited series. It looks like the Andor show will be a limited series. So I'm very curious. I think it'll be a few seasons, probably not as long as Clone Wars, but definitely a few.
Yeah, I don't know how long this one's gonna go. I predict maybe 2 or 3 seasons at the most. I would be fine with just 1 season, but I really don't know what kind of story they're trying to tell. I think season 1 would be setting up the characters, kind of delving into their story a little bit more and, letting the audience get familiar with them. And then like season 2 and maybe a possible season 3 would be about the main meat of their arc and how they end up at the end of it all, and if they die or not. But the next one was announced, that has been announced for a while, but I feel like it's finally growing some interest, is the Cassian Andor show, and it's just simply called Andor. They showed a new sizzle reel, and let's take a look at that real quick.
Best show. I'm really excited having the chance to explore Cassian. It's really fun to go on a set that is emulating something you like so much.
The enormity of this is like doing a big feature film.
It's very cinematic. For me, that's where the excitement is.
12 episodes, 12 scripts, over 200 named cast members, over 6,000 crowd people, a lot of creatures that come in from the creature department.
We treat this exactly like we would a film. There is no difference in our approach.
Every creature and droid that we've been building has the same care and level of attention to detail as the previous films.
It's huge, it's thrilling, but also it's wonderfully challenging.
There's tons of possibilities to explore. It is the building of a revolution.
I think it looked good. I think that did its job on getting people like me, who was not even remotely interested when they announced this. Like, this was the first, I think, live action show they announced. I can't remember if it was this or the Mandalorian.
I think it was shortly. I think Mandalorian was announced first, but this one was definitely the second.
Yeah, it was like, this is really what you're going to put money into. And looking at it, they do seem to be putting a lot of money into it. I'm surprised it's going to be 12 episodes. But I also trust Tony Gilroy, the showrunner for this, because he saved Rogue One, basically. Rogue One was a disaster when he came in and did a lot of reshoots, a lot of editing, and fixed it. I think giving this guy a lot more creative freedom and giving him his own series, and he also saved this series too, by the way. They were going to actually cancel this because the original writer they couldn't get things going with the original showrunner. Tony Gilroy comes in, saves the day again, and has been working on it ever since. So I think there's a little bit more hope for this, for being kind of like a surprisingly quality Star Wars story. What are your thoughts on it so far?
My thoughts to this are very similar to my thoughts on the Bad Batch. The character himself is somewhat interesting, but I'm not too invested. But the concept, I think, is what's going to be the main draw of the show. Just seeing like some of the origins of the rebellion. I mean, we're getting the same actor and character from Rogue One, so it's going to have that feel too. Maybe not a big war movie, but like a spy thriller, really gritty. Like the underworld of Star Wars. So that concept definitely intrigues me. One thing that's interesting that I noticed. Because they talked about K2SO at D23 last year, but when they mentioned the cast again, they didn't. What's his name? Alan Tudyk was not on the list, and they didn't mention him at all in the that sizzle reel. So I wonder if he's still a part of it. I hope so. I mean, K2 is hilarious.
I'm pretty confident he's still attached. I thought the main Star Wars website mentioned him. I think I saw it was official, but yeah, I don't know why he wasn't. I thought the same thing when we were just watching the sizzle reel. I was like, yeah, there's no K2 in it, but I also can definitely say for sure when I was at Star Wars Celebration in 2019, they did a special look into the Cassian Andor series, and K2 was there. I mean, there was a scene with him there. They've been working on this for a little bit, but they were just showing test footage at that time. So I think there would be a lot of disappointed fans if there was no K2, and I also think the dynamic of the show would not work as well. But maybe, hear me out on this, maybe there's a reason I'm not showing him, and maybe the first few episodes we don't meet K2 yet. Maybe we're getting like a Chewbacca and Han Solo moment from Solo's Star Wars story where they have to meet each other first, and then he's on board for the rest of the series.
I would be fine with that. One thing though that's going to piss off some people, not so much me, but definitely a few people. There is a one-issue comic that exists, canon, on how Cassian and K2 met. I feel like the odds that if K2 is not going to be there from the start, then they're going to show how they meet. So unless they basically kind of revive that one-shot comic, it's going to bother some people, but not me. I don't really care, but I just thought that would be an interesting thing to note. But I think we would see how these two meet. I think that would be an interesting episode, and seeing how K2 was reprogrammed from whatever unit, the K2 units before, to what he is now. So yeah, I hope he's attached to the project. I mean, he K2 is one of my favorite droids, and he was only in one movie. So I would be fairly disappointed if he wasn't here, but it wouldn't be like a series breaking thing for me if he wasn't there, but I would prefer if he was.
Oh, I disagree. It'd break the series for me. I mean, he was the best character in Rogue One. I mean, I know people love that movie, but it lacked character in every department except for K2. He was the only one who, when he died, I was even remotely sad about it. But the next show that I know me and you both aren't really entirely excited for, that was confirmed and been talked about for a long time, was the Lando series. It was confirmed that it's coming out. We don't know when, but the writer has been revealed to be Justin Simien, who wrote and made the series Dear White People. So me and Goldman know all about that. And yeah, I mean, like you said earlier, there's no attachment in terms of it's Billy D. Williams, it's Donald Glover. The report from earlier of this year from the Scoopers, those guys at KRT, was basically that both of those guys are going to be playing Lando, and Billy D would, of course, be playing the older Lando, and Donald Glover playing the younger. So I think we predicted at the time when we talked about this earlier in the year that it was going to be Billy D playing older Lando, kind of reflecting on his younger days, telling stories. And this is post Rise of Skywalker, post Episode 9. And then Donald Glover will be playing out those stories in real time in live action.
Yeah. It would be, I think it would be a huge missed opportunity if Donald Glover was not in it, because I feel like he was one of the biggest draws of Solo. I mean, he's a very well-known actor and singer. So I feel like you can't do this show if he's not in it. And then you can't do a show if it's just Billy D. Williams. So I think we should be safe in assuming that Donald Glover will be in it. Maybe they just haven't signed the contract yet officially or whatever, so they didn't want to announce it just in case he does drop the project. But yeah, he should definitely be in it. But in terms of I think the reason why I'm the least excited for this show is because most of the shows we've gotten so far, besides the character that's the titular character, it does expand some other aspect of the universe. Like the Andor show, it seems to expand the origins of the rebellion. The Ahsoka show is probably going to be that Rebel sequel that we probably won't end up getting now. The Bad Batch show seems to be exploring the galaxy after Revenge of the Sith. The Acolyte will probably explore some aspects of the Sith during the High Republic. With the Lando show, I'm not sure what there is. It just seems like it's just here's Lando's adventures. I mean, if they just want to make the show like that, I guess so. But I feel like the best shows, if you're going to focus on a singular character is that it's going to explore and expand another aspect of Star Wars. And I hope this does that. But like the gamblers, like this scum villainy aspect of Star Wars, I feel like we've seen that so many times, especially with Solo. So I think that's why this show definitely has me the least interested.
That's fair. I think a big thing with that is kind of what you're talking about on like, we don't really know what the story is going to be here. And personally, I think what would make this a little better is that we find out it is after Solo, a Star Wars story. It takes place after that. And it's kind of like the sequel to Solo, where it's not about Han, it's not really about Lando, but it's about that aspect of Kira and Darth Maul teaming up. And I know personally, because I think I was one of the first people this year to run a scoop on it, that Lucasfilm is bringing back Darth Maul in live action. Like, and I know other people confirmed that a few months ago before the Ray Park thing happened, literally the day that they came out with it, ironically. But Darth Maul's coming back in live action in some sense. And if it was going to be in anything, I'd imagine it would be in this series, in that this series would focus on Lando probably running into Kira again, getting involved with that drug trade stuff and exploring that story a little bit more, because Alan Ehrenreich also said he was interested in coming back. And I think this would be kind of the realm for that to happen. So it's up in the air on how well they can execute this. They can do a lot of good things with this series, but they also can make a really big dud. And this could be, unfortunately, the one that just
people kind of forget about like after it's
done. Very much
Mm-hmm.
so. And I hope the writer Justin Simien does well. I know some people have complained, and this may be from the guys on the Phantom Menace side of the aisle for Star Wars fans, who have said that they hope this show isn't preachy because of his experience in Hollywood filmmaking and whatnot, which I can kind of understand, but also I have to, reserve judgment until I actually see the show. So it'll be I don't know. I can't say I'm really excited for this. It's very weird. Very weird.
If they did focus on the racial aspect of it, that would be very interesting, because in the Star Wars universe, and someone in the comments correct me if I'm wrong, but we've never really seen racism against humans, like people of color. Like the racism in Star Wars seems to always be against aliens, whether it be like Thrawn or Wookiee, or especially droids.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to imagine if they were to kind of do that preachy aspect of it. I don't think they'll go that route. I think this would be just a fun, like just a standalone story. I could see it being something like Star Wars Resistance, because that show, it's very irrelevant. It's done. No one really cares about it anymore. So like worst case scenario, this show is probably going to be that. I can't imagine you can ruin Lando. I know people are, every time a returning character comes back, and after Last Jedi, people are like, oh, this character might get ruined. I mean, what is there that you could do to ruin Lando? I mean, I know people have talked about how Lando might be pansexual. Maybe that would bother some people. But it would be very hard to ruin Lando. So, I think worst case scenario, this is just a show I'd watch once. I'd be like, it was fine. I can move on with my life. That's why it's so hard for me to get excited. I don't feel like this show is going to be groundbreaking or anything.
I agree wholeheartedly. We'll see what happens. Maybe we'll see Jaina show up from Rise of Skywalker and have a sit-down talk with her dad. But the more interesting one, the show that I really feel like the prequel fans are going to love, is the Kenobi series, which is officially titled Obi-Wan Kenobi. No big shocker there. But they also confirmed that, of course, Hayden Christensen is returning. But not only is he returning, but he's also going to be playing the role of Darth Vader. The show takes place now 10 years after Revenge of the Sith, which I think was different from the original scripts that they had. But what was a little new was the Lucasfilm president, Kathleen Kennedy, said that they're going to have a rematch of the century. And like you were saying earlier, it seems like they're going to meet each other again and kind of retcon that line from A New Hope, where I feel like they're going to play coy with us, where they're like, oh, well, if you remember New Hope, he says, I haven't felt his presence since he never said when. He didn't say Mustafar. Yeah. But I think in terms of story and the impact of it, it would have been better to keep it as Mustafar. But I also feel like if Obi-Wan does not know Anakin is alive, or Anakin is he knows he's Darth Vader, but he doesn't know that Darth Vader is alive, I feel like if he runs into him just out of the blue, or senses a presence from him and knows it's him, that could be a very big emotional moment that is very shocking to us as an audience. What are your thoughts on the news that we have for this show so far?
Yeah, that's my like go-to assumption with Hayden coming back as Anakin / Darth Vader. Again, I mentioned this earlier. I would be shocked if they didn't do some sort of flashback, because you can't have Hayden Christensen. You're not going to cast Hayden Christensen just to play the body of Darth Vader. You want to see Anakin, and I think that would be the most interesting aspect of the show with Obi-Wan, and this is 10 years after, and I think that would say a lot. 10 years after Revenge of the Sith, if Obi-Wan's still really struggling with what happened, I think this could be a very Logan-esque story where you just see a person dealing with the traumas of the past, and maybe he thinks Anakin / Darth Vader has been dead this whole time, and then somehow he learns that Vader's still alive. That's a little tricky because Darth Vader is supposedly a well-known person in the galaxy. But maybe he isn't at this time, and then maybe the quest is that Obi-Wan has to confront Vader just to kind of like dealing with the past. It's a way to deal with PTSD. Sometimes you just have to face your demons, if you will, and that's something that Obi-Wan just needs to go through. And kind of maybe this is one last attempt for Obi-Wan to try and turn Anakin back to the light, because there was that interesting line in Return of the Jedi where Jar Jar and Acolyte. That'd be hilarious. There was that line in Return of the Jedi when Luke is fighting Vader, where Luke's saying there's so good in you, and Vader's like, Obi-Wan once thought as you do. But we never really see Obi-Wan still have hope that Anakin can turn back to the light side. Once he goes to Mustafar in Revenge of the Sith, he's kind of okay, Anakin is down this dark path. And then the one time we see him in Rebels, he refers to Luke as the chosen one, which basically means he doesn't think Anakin is the chosen one anymore. So maybe this is Obi-Wan has a plea to try and turn Anakin back to the light side. It's something very similar to the Ahsoka versus Vader fight in Rebels, but it obviously doesn't work. I think that would be my prediction for how the show is gonna go. I mean, if you're marketing this as the rematch of the century, then Vader's gonna have a significant role in the show. He's not just gonna show up in the last episode and they fight. I feel like if you're gonna market that would be a disservice if you didn't have Vader be in it at least a decent amount. Did they confirm how many episodes this series will be?
They did not confirm it. The reports are saying, and this is from Fantha Tracks, and I think I know those people, and I know they have high connections at Lucasfilm. They were saying 6 episodes at minimum.
That's fine with me. I think I would like it if this show was a movie length, shorter. Not obviously I don't want it to go 2 seasons, and it doesn't look like they're going to do that. So that would be my guess as to what the overall plot would be. That it's about Obi-Wan coming to terms with the past.
Yeah, I know the reports from earlier this year and some of the stuff that came out yesterday from supposed insiders with story details is that Darth Vader, of course, is going to be the main villain, but he is going to send a clone squad, I imagine the 501st, and Commander Cody will be yet again kind of the villain of it, and Cody is going to be hunting down Obi-Wan. The big question is why, after all this time, why after 10 years, is Vader just now sending it? Maybe he just now discovered Obi-Wan's still around. Maybe he just ran into him and has a feeling on where he's at. I feel like Kenobi is not going to stay on Tatooine.
Absolutely not.
There was a book that I read, a young adult's book, I think, in elementary, about I can't remember the name of it. I know we've talked about it on the stream before, that basically Obi-Wan gets a mission with other Jedi and they try to rebuild the Jedi Order. He doesn't stick around for long in the series, but he leaves Tatooine to go help them out a little bit. So maybe it's something similar to that. Maybe there's some mission that he needs to go do, and he needs to go take down Cody. He needs to go take down Vader, something like that. But that's kind of the general vibe that I get from the show. And also the reports from earlier this year said that there will be a lot of flashbacks to the Clone Wars, and that's where we'll see Hayden Christensen's face. I'm surprised they're bringing him back as Vader. That was the one where I was like, really? Him? No disrespect to Hayden, but really?
There's no way they're gonna have Hayden voice Darth Vader. I don't even think they'll bring back James Earl Jones, because in Rogue One you could kind of notice that Vader's voice was a little different.
It was weird.
And you could definitely have like the actor from the holiday special voice Vader or someone else. Anyone, there's definitely a lot of people qualified enough to voice Vader. So yeah, we're gonna see Anakin in flashbacks, but I definitely think there's like a few. I hate going into stories with like this mentality that there's things you can't do, but with this show, since you are playing loosey goosey with the canon, especially with the implications of the lines from Episode 4, I feel like I do have some rules. Like one, Vader can't know that Obi-Wan's been on Tatooine this whole time, because if he does, then that makes him look like a big idiot. Like, why would he never seek him out on Tatooine? So I definitely think that the series could begin with Obi-Wan has like a call to action for whatever reason. Whether it be, I don't think it's going to involve the rebellion because everyone assumes he's dead except for Bail, Organa, and Yoda. So maybe he, for whatever reason we don't know, he leaves Tatooine, whether it's to go help someone else or to get closure on Anakin. So yeah, and Vader can't know that he's ever been on Tatooine, and he can't know about Luke at all, obviously. So yeah, I definitely think the show might begin with him leaving, and then Vader gets word that Obi-Wan's still around, and he sends the 501st, whatever. But I think they're playing loosey-goosey again with the canon, because the clones were discontinued shortly after Revenge of the Sith. So if they're still around by 10 years after, maybe Cody is, because, he was a captain, but I think it's going to be mostly stormtroopers. And maybe if Cody's part of it, they're going to use the Bad Batch and tie it in some way. We probably won't see the Bad Batch in this show, but if Cody's involved and maybe Vader, then possible. It's very possible. Yeah, that's my prediction for the Obi-Wan show.
Yeah, I hope it comes out in 2022, like the Cassian and Andor series, because that would mean a very, very good year for Star Wars in 2022, because you would have the Jedi Fallen Order sequel, you would have the Cassian and Andor series, you would have the Kenobi series, and of course, Mandalorian season 4, because they basically have confirmed they're going to do that every year until the series is over. The next big series, though, the one that I personally am now most excited for, really wish we had a release date. Oh, I don't even think I have the picture for it up right now at the moment. Let me get it. But of course, it is the Acolyte, the Leslie Headland series. And this is the one that shocked me in terms of what its story is about and what's going to kind of happen, and mainly the premise of it. If you guys remember, I think it was last week's episode, I specifically said that I wanted to learn more about the Sith during the High Republic era. Here it is. And they're kind of doing that. It's titled The Acolyte, and it's described as a mystery thriller that will take the audience into a galaxy of shadowy secrets and emerging dark side powers in the final days of the High Republic. And like I said, this is exactly what I have been asking for basically years at this point, is that I want to see the Sith in a different era. This isn't going to be about Darth Vader. It's not going to be about Darth Sidious. I pray to God it's not about Darth Sidious. And it's not going to be Darth Maul. It's just going to be new Sith. Because when I hear Acolyte, I think Sith Acolyte. There's no Jedi Acolytes, So I think this is the Sith coming back and into action. What are your thoughts on this show? We both said, by the way, this is our number one rated show in terms of excitement. This is the one we both look forward to the most.
I think the reason why I'm the most excited for this is because we know that if this takes place during the end of the High Republic, whenever that is, it's still probably at least more than 150 years before the Phantom Menace. So that means the Sith looks like they're going to be involved with this. But the Sith can't be like revealed to the galaxy. At the end of the series, if it does indeed revolve around the Sith, they will still be in hiding. So I think with that in mind, they can do something really like sneaky. Like if one of the main characters is a Sith, obviously they can disguise themselves as a like just regular people. I mean, Palpatine and Dooku did it. I could definitely see them focusing on just like, again, like they did the mystery thriller. Maybe the main character is not a Sith and it's someone that's like beginning to have discover the Sith maybe, and then like they die at the end or something. But I don't know. The possibilities of this series are endless, but they're focusing on the dark side, and the dark side has always been cooler than the light side. So just having a show focus on the dark side makes me happy. And if the rumors or the reports are true, because when Leslie Headland was first, even before she was officially announced, people said she would be the head of a female-centric show. I would love to see a show that revolves around the Sith, and it's a female Sith. Because in canon, we don't have any. We have Palpatine, Plagueis, Vader, Maul, Dooku, and then like I guess Kylo and Snoke, even though they're not really Sith. But yeah, we haven't had. I know we've had female bad guys before, and I guess we've had Ventress, but I want like a full-on female Sith. I would love to see that. I don't think we'd get something quite like whatever her name was, Xana, the red Twi'lek that was in George Lucas. I doubt we'll get something like that, but I would definitely love to see a female Sith.
I know we saw one in the comic books for Darth Vader. She was the master of Darth Momin. Her name was Master Shah, I think. And I don't remember. Of course, didn't really know much about her at all, which, not a big deal. Who cares about her because it's a comic book. But this is supposed to be the reports for the Leslie Headland series is that it is female centric and it is martial arts focused. So this kind of lines up with the idea that it's the Sith in training, that there is probably a young female apprentice who is learning the ways of the Sith in a rather brutal way because it is the Sith. So I'm very intrigued with this. I like the idea of this being the Sith during this time of the High Republic where the Jedi are at the height of their power and they need to kind of keep in hiding. And I would imagine the rule of two is probably still a thing at this point. Definitely. But I would, for me, it's just the idea of exploring more about the powers of the dark side and the secrets of the Force and everything. I really hope they kind of do a little bit more of that. And I'm still skeptical of Leslie Headland as a showrunner because she is someone who has no experience in the realm of sci-fi, big live action stuff like this. But I'll give credit where credit is due. I mean, this is a very interesting show. Very interesting show. Fofo, thank you very much for the super chat. He says, I see the Acolyte. If it does well, will spawn more shows and possibly a movie that explores the High Republic. And that's a good point because they said they were not going to do any High Republic content. And look at it now. I mean, honestly, we're getting the books in 2021, a second wave in 2022, and then I'd imagine 2024 maybe we would see this show, or maybe even 2023. We have no actual release date, but this has been in the works since late 2019, so it's it seems to be developing nicely. And man, a lot of balls for Lucasfilm. Honestly, I have to give them credit where credit is due. They're doing a lot of right things. What are your hopes for this series?
Yeah, I would say that it focuses around the Sith, but I don't want it to be too grand in scale. I think it's really interesting that they describe it as the tail end of the High Republic, because the High Republic's going to start next year. And with all these shows besides the movie and the Andor show, they don't have release dates. I think we can assume the Obi-Wan's going to come out in 2022 because they're going to start filming in March next year, so it's probably going to be 2022. Besides that, we don't know the other shows, so it's probably going to be at the earliest late 2022 or early 2023. So that's probably when we're going to see the show, like 2.5 years from now, which would be, it's so weird that they're announcing shows this early on before it releases, which I'm fine with, but you don't really see that these days. I think one of my favorite aspects about these shows, and it's not specific to this show, it's pretty much all the shows. People talk about diversity and stuff. I think the best part about these shows is not so much the diversity of the people behind it, but the diversity of those people in terms of the content they've created before. We've had directors that have done very different things if you look at their past projects, and I really like that. I like how these shows should feel different from each other. Like with the Marvel movies, they all somewhat feel the same. I mean, which is fine for something like Marvel, but with Star Wars, especially a show like The Acolyte, should feel radically different than a show like the Lando show. So I love how they're bringing in these different people with different backgrounds with their careers to make these shows. So that makes, and I hope Leslie Headland is going to be able to tackle this darker aspect of the Star Wars universe very well. And I have trust that they will do that. I'm going to be excited until I have a reason not to be with a show like this.
I have to give you a lot of kudos, bro. You got me a little bit more excited for that, for this now, and just in general, because I haven't thought about that aspect of it. And that's something that I should, I've studied Lucas a lot over the past few years because, admire the man a lot, and he's talked about that on how Star Wars is really great for different filmmakers to come in with different mindsets, and The Mandalorian proved that. Season 1 and even Season 2 shows that when you have multiple people from very differing backgrounds. Taika Waititi came from the filmmaking realm. Deborah Chow came from the TV world. You have Dave Filoni, who came from animation. Jon Favreau, who's done it all basically. Deborah Chow. I mean, there's so many different directors now with Season 2 as well that come from so many different parts of movie making, television, and just this art of storytelling. And the idea that you can get someone like what was it? Rick Famuyiwa even said that he came from like really kind of ghetto movies to something like this, and I think he's arguably one of the better directors. And we'll talk about Mandalorian in a few minutes, but that's the one that I think this has really shown that Star Wars can do really well with a lot of different creative minds, and like you were saying, you have a different feel, because I don't want this to be like Marvel. I don't want every single movie and every single episode and of every show to feel very similar, because when it comes to Marvel, and I'm sorry for any Marvel fans, you don't need a director. It's mostly the production company and the studio saying, this is what's going to happen, this is how it's going to happen, and oh, you want money? We'll give you money and, put your name to it, give you some credits. But they don't have a lot of free say. I feel like Lucasfilm is finally letting these creators have a little bit more free say and kind of freedom on what they want to do.
Yeah. And I think just another thing that makes me really excited is, we had something like the sequel trilogy, and there's a lot of risks with the sequel trilogy. In terms of just conceptually, and did piss off a lot of people in the way they ruined Luke Skywalker or stuff like that. And that's not how I feel, but it ruined it for other people. With a lot of these shows, especially like the Acolyte, I mean, you're going so far back and you're exploring just different people that, like, the worst case scenario isn't something that's really that bad. Like, if the show sucks, it's like, okay, we move on. Like, at least we'll have Mandalorian season 10 or the Ahsoka show or the Rangers and New Republic show. That'll be hopefully really good. So like, I think they could be really risky with these certain things. I feel like the era of safe Star Wars is kind of coming to a close. We got Force Awakens and Rise of Skywalker, which were fairly safe films. And also Solo and Rogue One were, I would say, somewhat safe. But I think like with those films, you kind of understand, with Force Awakens, you had to revive Star Wars, and there was pressure to like make back the $4 billion investment that they made for buying Lucasfilm. I think now they're past that, and especially on with a show, you can be a lot more risky. And I think a show like The Acolyte is the show you can be the riskiest for. And that makes me the most excited. I'd rather a show be risky because if it's risky, it has the potential to be the best or the worst. And if it's safe, it's going to be around here. And I don't want safe stories left and right. I mean, this is a Star Wars show, so it's going to be, if you're doing something Star Wars, it has to have a certain feel to it. But you still have a lot more freedom. Like, this isn't going to be a rated R show or anything, but it's going to be a lot more darker. And again, like I said before, different to something like Lando. So yeah, I think just the potential of this show is definitely the highest compared to anything we have here, even the movie. So I think that's why I'm the most excited for this.
I agree. The story concept for this is better than every single show and series we have, because most of them we have expectations on, we kind of know how things are going to end. Obi-Wan's not going to die in the Kenobi series, and Andor's not going to die either. Lando, his story's kind of over as it is. And Rogue Squadrons, it's like, oh, it's cool, but it's not the Jedi, it's not the Sith. This is the dark side. This is something that we have not really explored since, basically ever in terms of live action, and that's what I love about it. And plus, there's a lot of like hints in the 6 Star Wars movies by George Lucas of the Sith kind of having some power in the past. And one of my favorite lines ever is from Emperor Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith, where he says, once more, the Sith shall rule the galaxy. So that means they have ruled the galaxy at some point. I would love to know about that era. And even if it's just for a small duration of time, they ruled it for, let's say, 1,000 years, maybe less than 1,000 years. That's still something Lucasfilm could explore. And I feel like that's something the Acolyte could talk about a little bit, where the master tells the apprentice, like, yeah, there was a time we actually run things, and believe it or not, the galaxy was a lot better for it. Stuff like that to really expand upon the story of Star Wars. Before we move on to the next topics, GamerMax send another super chat. Thank you, my friend. He says, have you played any other Lego games outside of Star Wars? Personally, I played the Batman one, and I hated it. that was my exploration outside of Lego.
I played the the Lego Jurassic World one. A big waste of $60. If it was like $10, maybe, but I spent the full price. I was like, I'm bored. Let's buy a Lego game. It's fine. I mean, you're not going to get something like super emotional with a Lego game. I do regret buying it for that price, but yeah, I mean, interesting question. I like the uniqueness of that question.
I do too, because I haven't thought about a lot of Lego games outside of Marvel. That's or outside of Star Wars. That's really been my Lego game passion, I guess. Two of the smaller projects, though, are last topics about the Star Wars shows before we get onto the Mandalorian, is the Star Wars Visions and a Droid Story. Visions is a 10 animated short series set in the Star Wars universe, so it's all canon, it sounds like, but it will be made by different Japanese animated studios. Droid Story is also described as an epic journey, which will introduce us to a new hero, which is a droid, guided by a legendary duo of R2-D2 and C-3PO. Personally, neither of these two really did much for me in terms of intrigue, but which one of these are you looking forward to the most?
I would say Visions. Visions is actually something that's a little more exciting to me than what we've seen before. Even if this is something that's like not really canon, the Droids one I have no interest in. Like I'll probably watch it once. It's probably a cute kids thing, and I'll be fine with it and move on. This, I mean, it's gonna be anime. I'm not an anime person, but seeing that style brought to Star Wars could be really unique. Even if these stories aren't canon, they're doing something similar to whether it be like a What If type series or something like the Galaxies of Adventures shorts, but something that's just longer and in the anime. I would like that. I think I'm more open to stories not being canon if they're like in a cartoon aspect or some kind. I'm not sure if they described if whether or not this is gonna be canon or not, but either way, they said it's gonna be an anthology collection, and I'm down for that. You know, just like 10 short stories that take place anywhere in the galaxy. It could focus on a random person, or it could focus on a story with characters we already know, like maybe a story with Obi-Wan and Anakin, like before Attack of the Clones. Maybe a story with Rey and Finn before Rise of Skywalker and after Last Jedi. Just like exploring little stories with the characters that we know and fleshing them out a little more, and being really cool with the anime style. So I'm looking forward to this one. Not so much the Droid ones.
Yeah, the Droid one, I agree. It sounds like something that will be geared towards a younger audience. I imagine Anthony Daniels is going to come back and reprise his role as C-3PO as he always does. And R2-D2 is just a bunch of beeps and boops. So it's not hard. And yeah, that was the one where they announced it. I was like, okay, yeah, that is cute. It'll be on Disney Plus. Younger kids will enjoy it, and I'm happy for them. Visions does sound interesting because it's going to be 10 different studios working on this. It's going to be multiple different people. Yeah. And so for me, this is the one that I was like, all right, Visions, I think I would like to do the Clone Wars 2003 animation style. Cool. That would be something that I really enjoy and have some excitement for, because I grew up on that. That was the one that I remember the most. I was watching that all the time when I would visit my dad and just have it on DVD and play it nonstop. But the last two shows are both Mandalorian spinoff series, so we're going to be talking about the Mandalorian stuff basically from here on out. And they take place during the same timeline as the Mandalorian as well, which I kind of like. I think that adds a unique spin to this. The first one is the Rangers of the New Republic, and they said that this is going to be, I like this aspect of it, is that it's going to be executive produced by both Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni. So that means that these guys are having the vision of the Mandalorian taken into a different series, and I feel like they're going to tie in the story just a little bit. What are your thoughts on Rangers of the New Republic so far?
I really like this concept. I've said this before, I'm not a big fan of when shows just revolve around one single character. I mean, there are a few exceptions, but like with this, I mean, we don't know who this is going to involve. I assume it's going to revolve around characters we already know. No, most likely, what's her name? Cara Dune. I think the aspect of the show that has me the most intrigued is some of that sequel trilogy world building that we didn't get, in terms of like that one pilot that spoke to Cara Dune at the end of chapter 12. He said something like, something's going on out here this far out in the galaxy, and the New Republic is ignoring it. And that's kind of a hint as like to the First Order. And even in this most recent episode, they mentioned like the one Imperial officer is like, people don't want freedom, they want order. So it's kind of like a little sub mention of the First Order. So I think I would like that aspect of it. And then they said these 3 shows, Mando, Rangers in the Republic, and Ahsoka, are going to culminate into some big event. I have a better idea of what I think Ahsoka is going to do, but this one I really don't know. I mean, I assume it's going to involve the Empire in some capacity. But yeah, the show is pretty vague right now. We don't have many specifics, but if it's with Favreau and Filoni, then I'm definitely more inclined to be excited for it.
Yeah, I trust Favreau and Filoni a lot at this point, and I really do hope they bring Gina Carano back as Cara Dune for this. Also, personally, from this last episode of The Mandalorian, I hope Mayfield comes back. I hope Bill Burr is part of this in some way. I mean, he did amazing. So maybe that'll happen. We don't know much about this yet. No, it takes place during the same timeline as The Mandalorian. So do you think it takes place after The Mandalorian, and that's kind of where we see Cara Dune come in and serve as the Marshal, or I guess now as the new Ranger? And also, do you think there's going to be a main character, or do you think there's going to be multiple characters that we focus on, kind of since it's called Rangers of the New Republic?
I could see it where there's like one somewhat main character, like Cara Dune, but I feel like the focus of the show is going to be on a team, kind of like Rogue One. Like Jyn was the main character of Rogue One, but at the end of the day, it was a movie about a team. And I hope that is what this show is going to focus on. It's probably going to take place concurrently. I don't think it's going to take place like after the last season of The Mandalorian. I think like whatever, say the show comes out after season 3, then chronologically this show would probably take place either during season 3 or right after season 3 ends. And then maybe, I don't think they would do this, but maybe they're going to have like the shows release at the same time. I don't think they'd do that, but it would be interesting if like this, Ahsoka and The Mandalorian are happening at the same time, and there's like a big ongoing storyline between those 3 stories, and then it culminates into something. Because they did say the stories are going to culminate towards something. Maybe there'll be a movie. That would be kind of cool. But yeah, I think it's going to be mostly about a team with a pseudo main character, if that makes sense.
I agree, and I like the idea that it would build towards something with The Mandalorian. I don't think they would do something where there's multiple shows that are going on at once. I think the main reason for that is that I think starting in 2021, and I actually like this idea, that basically Star Wars is going to be a year-round thing. And I don't mean like every day or every week we're getting a new Star Wars episode, but I'm talking like maybe from February to May, we have a Star Wars series. And then from June to August, or maybe October or November, we have another Star Wars show or series. And then we do what we did with Mandalorian this year, November to December, another Star Wars series. So it's almost year round. You may get a month or two off to focus on marketing and whatnot, but I think we're going to have nonstop Star Wars content. I wouldn't even say for the next few years. I think for the foreseeable future. I think there's still more Star Wars shows they have in the works that they have not told us about yet. And that just excites me beyond relief. So I don't think they're going to do 2 shows at once, but I think eventually something is going to have to cross because there's going to be so many things in the works. It's going to be hard to control all that quality if you're doing so much quantity, but and I'm not trying to harp on it. To be fair, there are there's a lot of stuff they've done over the past few years with the sequel trilogy where it's been not a lot of quantity, but also some people would say not a lot of quality either. I feel like they've really shifted their gears on to something different. Last topic when it comes to the new announcements and shows is, of course, the Ahsoka Tano series that has been announced. And I think this is a big one. This will be written by Dave Filoni, and I think he's probably going to direct a lot of the episodes as well. And this is the live-action Ahsoka Tano series. Rosario Dawson reprising her role as Ahsoka. Do you have any expectations or thoughts about this? They say it's taking place during the same timeline as Mandalorian as well. What are your hopes?
I think this is definitely going to be that Rebels successor show that was rumored. I don't think that's going to happen anymore. I mean, I feel like we can assume this show is going to be it's going to bring closure to that Thrawn and Ezra storyline. I mean, with the last time we saw Ahsoka, she mentioned where's Grand Admiral Thrawn. that's basically going to be what the show is about. Whether it be her finding Thrawn to find Ezra, or she's already with Ezra and they want to take out Thrawn. I think now I'm more inclined to believe that maybe Thrawn will be the big bad of the Mandalorian. Maybe maybe what's his name? Gideon dies, whether it be this season or somewhere else. And then, as I said, these stories are going to culminate. So if this Ahsoka series is going to be about finding Ezra and Thrawn, then I feel like Thrawn could definitely be what these 3 shows are leading towards. And it kind of makes me think even more so that they're doing the they're somewhat rebooting the original Heir to the Empire trilogy. They're probably going to play loosey-goosey with the story, but Thrawn was the big bad of that, and there was a big Imperial remnant. And I feel like they've only touched the surface of what this Imperial remnant is. It does bring up the question, when this all ends, how is that going to tie in with the First Order? I feel like it will, because Favreau did mention that at some point. But yeah, I think this is going to be that Rebels successor show that we didn't get yet, and I think it's going to be that.
That's a really good idea, because honestly, having Rangers of the New Republic focus on kind of discovering more maybe First Order stuff, and you have Ahsoka looking for Thrawn, which of course leads to Ezra. And I like the idea of Thrawn kind of being the big bad guy of it all, and basically all 3 shows kind of tie in into a way where it's like, oh, we have another like big reveal of the way I'm trying to phrase this and think about this is that you have Rangers of the New Republic, Ahsoka Tano, and Mandalorian, all 3 of these separate shows and series discover that Thrawn is the bad guy. And then after that, we have a story that's not Mandalorian, not Ahsoka, not Rangers of the New Republic. It's like its own series, maybe even its own movie or trilogy, which that's a reach, but maybe its own series on dealing with the Thrawn threat. And one of the reasons I say that is because we have the Chiss ascendancy, which is still going on. They're still very powerful at this point. I mean, we haven't gotten to the 3rd or 2nd book from Timothy Zahn, but when Thrawn is talking to Emperor Palpatine at the end of the 3rd book from the first trilogy, it's pretty clear that the Chiss are still around and doing their own thing. And he runs into him in that same book. Wasn't a great book, but it did explore a lot of the Chiss and kind of how their structure is put. So imagine if the Chiss kind of become the big villain of the timeline between episodes 6 and 7, or maybe even hinting at them having a lot more of an impact. I think there's a lot to be done with Thrawn and his entire race, the Chiss ascendancy, because there's so much to do out in the unknown regions that they call the chaos.
Yeah, and I think I like that idea because with The Force Awakens, they've somewhat handicapped the story potential between episodes 6 and 7 because they said it's kind of like the 30-year time of peace. So that means to like most of the galaxy, there isn't going to be a war going on. But if you focus on the Chiss are in the unknown regions, and I mean, based off the Rise of Skywalker, you can do a lot in the unknown regions without the rest of the galaxy finding out. So if there is some sort of not war, but like big conflict that involves the Chiss, the Mandalorians, this remnant of the Empire, if they want that big conflict, they can do it in the unknown regions, and the rest of the galaxy won't really know about it. So I think that's a way. It's kind of like the loophole in what The Force Awakens established with the lore. So I definitely like that idea of exploring the Chiss. What's interesting though is the Chiss. Thrawn's characterization in this newest Thrawn trilogy is that he's kind of Chiss first, Empire second. Like he joined the Empire with hopes that he would defend the Chiss. I wonder, we still don't really know if Thrawn is with the Empire or if he's with the Chiss at this point during The Mandalorian. I could see him being with the Chiss, and maybe the Empire gets defeated at some point, and then they just shift, and that there's a new main villain. I think that would be interesting. I would like it if the Empire wasn't the single like big villain the whole series. If it is, I'm not going to be upset. But I think having the Chiss play a bigger role would be really interesting. You can do a lot more with the Chiss than you could do with the Empire.
I agree, mainly because they have what they call, ironically, the Skywalkers, which is just children who can use the Force, and they actually call that third sight in that species, and they have a really big influence. Like they're basically the empire of the unknown regions, and they call it the chaos, and they control a lot of different species and aliens like the Leoeoans and the the cartoon, I think is how you pronounce it. So there's a lot that they have influence over, and I would like the idea of like Thrawn saying, "Oh, the reason the Chiss have been building this empire is because there's something else out there in the unknown regions that we're very afraid of, and you need to be afraid of." And there's so many things to build on with exploring that era. But any last thoughts on any of these shows and any of these series in the works before we move on to, of course, the Mandalorian?
I think something that the Ahsoka show could talk about, and this is kind of just piggybacking off of the Chiss, is that, the First Order, it's been established that they grew in the unknown regions. If there is during the Mandalorian and beforehand, if the Chiss are the kind of dominating force of the unknown regions, that means that the First Order, or at least whatever in some capacity, had to have fought the Chiss in some capacity. Like if they dominated the unknown regions, if First Order dominated the unknown regions during the events of the sequels, that means they have fought in the Chiss at some point. So maybe that war could be something that's explored later on in the future. I would like that. And then one more thing about just all the shows in general. I think the concern of fatigue is much less with shows than it is with movies. Because, movies, even though story-wise, it's only like 2 hours and the show is much longer, I feel like when a movie's coming out, it's just a lot bigger and it's a lot more meaningful to the fans. But with shows, like with The Mandalorian, people weren't really talking about it until it came out. I mean, they released like the first trailer a month before the show was released, or this season was released. But with a movie, they'll release a trailer like 8 months before, and it's just a much bigger deal. So I think if they have all these shows and there's just like one ongoing show, like in the future, maybe in 2024, they'll have a show that's like 8 episodes. Then it takes like a break for 2 months. Then the next one comes out, and then there's a break, and then the next one. I feel like there won't be fatigue because it shows, and only like 40 minutes per week. I don't think would be as big as one movie.
Yeah, plus there's more to look forward to. If you don't like this last episode, you're like, oh, well, I can watch the next one. There's not really much of an investment with shows, and I think there's risk in that aspect of it. And with the movies, it's like you got to go big or go home. If you don't make if you don't make $1 billion in the box office, you didn't do a good job. And there's a lot of publicity and all that. This is a safer way to do it, but also a very interesting way to do it, and something that Star Wars has never really done. I mean, Lucas wanted to do his Star Wars Underworld series that was going to be 100 episodes, very ambitious and whatnot, but all this stuff is kind of blowing that out of the water. But also, to be fair, Kathleen Kennedy did say that she has not ruled out the possibility of Star Wars Underworld, so that's very interesting. But we also have the confirmation that Mandalorian Season 3 is coming holiday 2021, and not just holiday like, holiday times. It's apparently coming out Christmas Day 2021, so that's a bit of a shocker because that means it's going to roll over into 2022. But with that said, our last topic is, of course, reviewing Mandalorian Chapter 15, The Believer, which starred my favorite comedian, or one of my favorite comedians today, probably my second, is Bill Burr. He personally stole the show for me, and I think this episode gave one of the best acting performances I have ever seen in a Star Wars project, content in general. So what did you think about Chapter 15, The Believer?
I did a stream on this, and it's funny because this episode is really good. It's probably my second to least favorite episode of the season, but that's just because the other episodes have been really great, and I definitely think this was a good episode. People said this is filler, which I think is nonsense. But what we got with Bill Burr, it's funny because you kind of gave him, or the show kind of gave him, not really a redemption arc, but we saw him as this like scumbag in last season, and this season he did something that was very honorable. He knows, and they talked about it many times in this episode, he knows how important Mando keeping his helmet on is. And, he's now, after the show, he's the only living person to have seen Din Djarin's face. And, he's just like, I like when after he killed the Imperial officer, he's like, he just hands him the helmet, he looks away, and he's like, I haven't seen your face. And I really liked that. Because he knows, you think he's such a bad guy, especially since Mando locked him up in a prison cell last season. But I think it just shows he has some morals. And especially with what you mentioned, the really good acting scene, how they mentioned Operation Cinder. That's the fact that they mentioned Operation Cinder makes me so happy, because if you don't know what that is, you don't really need to know, because they kind of explain it in this. But we know what Operation Cinder is if you've played Battlefront 2.
Mhm.
So we know it makes more sense why he would want to leave the Empire and just the anger and hatred he has for the Empire now. And just seeing him at the end when he shot the whatever that mineral was that explodes, when he shot that with the sniper and he's like, I just had to get something off my chest. I really like that because he didn't need to say, like, he needed to overly say, like, oh, I had to do that so I can get over my feelings with the Empire. It was implied. And I think that was some really good writing. And I really liked what they did with his character. And I hope we see him again. You know, he's currently just wandering around right now. I hope we see him again at least once next season.
I think the positive response to his character in this episode is that we're going to see him more in the future. And honestly, I got to say, Rick Famuyiwa, the guy who wrote and directed this episode, I love him, man. He has not missed a single shot that he has taken when it comes to Mandalorian. I mean, he did chapter 2. He did chapter 2. He just directed, and that was one of the most fun chapters. It was the one where we got introduced to Grogu. He did chapter 6, which was the prison one, and that one, such a simple setting and setup, but very well executed, very fun, very funny, and action packed. And this one is the same thing. And to me, this was like, it didn't make me go, all right, Rick Famuyiwa needs to direct and write his own Star Wars movie. But it did make me say he needs to constantly be involved in Star Wars in the future. I need him in every single season of The Mandalorian. I need him in the Ahsoka Tano series. I need him everywhere when it comes to Star Wars because he is phenomenal at his job. So I'm hoping we see more of him. I'm hoping we see more of Bill Burr's character, Mayfield. And I would like to see him in the Ranger series, but also I would be fine with a series just solely on Bill Burr in Star Wars. I mean, what's funny about it is that if you know Bill Burr as a person, I mean, I like this guy enough where like I will listen to his podcast from time to time, or there's compilations on YouTube of him just ranting because that's what he does. He's like one of the angry white guys who just rants about life. And so he's really funny in that sense. And you can see like a lot of his personality coming out in Mayfield. I mean, it feels like Mayfield was just written as a Bill Burr impersonator. And he kind of did a lot of that when he's talking about like, oh, the Empire, us, it's all the same to these people. When he's talking about the villagers, he's like, we're just, coming in on their land. When he's talking to the Imperial guy and he's like, oh yeah, well, what about the, families, the guys who were just defending their planet, for freedom? What do you think they think about this whole situation? And the guy's like, all heroes of the Empire. He's like, yeah, it depends on who you ask, kind of thing. Like that stuff is something very much in Bill Burr's character, but it also really did, like you said, redeem Mayfield as a character in terms of he didn't look at Din Djarin's face. He saved him, and it's very impactful that he just kind of handed the helmet, looked away, and it makes you wonder, did he make eye contact with the guy throughout the entire thing? I mean, he kind of wanted to peek a glance at him when he was doing the face detection thing, but ever since then, it doesn't seem like there was a single scene where he like looked at his face and digested the whole thing. Yeah. So it's very one of my favorite episodes, honestly. It's one that I watched it twice, once by myself, and I wanted to watch it with my girlfriend and see what she thought. And she was a little iffy with it at first for the first like 20 minutes, but then at the end she was like, I really enjoyed that episode. And one of the reasons she said was, of course, Bill Burr. So definitely one of my favorites. It's hard to judge Mandalorian right now because I think season 2 has done such a great job that there's only one episode I don't like, and that was chapter 10. The one with the spiders. That's the only one I don't like. But all the other ones, I may have had some complaints from time to time. Chapter 14, I thought was weirdly shot, looked very fan film. But every single episode this season has done its job in terms of story, and I've enjoyed it. I have enjoyed this season more than I did enjoy season 1, and I think that's hard to say. I
definitely enjoyed this season much more than season 1. I think one aspect of the show, and I saw it on Twitter, when something's on Twitter, you gotta take it with a grain of salt, but they pointed out the acting of Pedro Pascal without the helmet, and how he does these subtle things. Like, he's kind of weird with the way he like looks, because he's so used to looking with the helmet. So you can't just like look to the side, you have to full on turn your head and look. And there's a lot of those little notions. And also how he was kind of really awkward, talking to someone without his helmet. He's like, he like paused a lot because, he hasn't spoken to someone without his helmet on in 20 years maybe for him. So I really liked the subtle acting of Pedro Pascal here. And then at the end, I have the shot up here when he's like, he hasn't really admitted it. It's kind of assumed, but when he's like, the kid means more to me than you will ever know. It just like, it hasn't completed like his character arc. Because we still got much to go, but it's just amazing. And I think it shows so much heart how he begins the series as kind of like this loner bounty hunter who barely talks. And now in this episode, he basically broke his creed, his code that you can't let anyone else see your face. He broke that just for a chance at rescuing Baby Yoda. And he genuinely loves that kid, that Baby Yoda. And this episode showed that. And I think I just really appreciate the character work that this episode did. Like, I mean, the plot stuff, there wasn't too much. I mean, they just go to get some information about the location of Moff Gideon. And those episodes, like, conceptually, this episode could have very easily been something like filler, where they just got one thing and that was the whole episode. But there was a lot of good character work with this episode that I really appreciated.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. And Jon Favreau didn't write this episode. This was all Rick Famuyiwa. So, I mean, that just goes to show that, like, you can still have someone else who's not Jon Favreau make a really good story. And even if it's kind of a filler episode, like you said, the character progression in it made it not a filler episode. So for me, I gave it a 9 out of 10. One of my favorite episodes so far. But like I said earlier, season 2 has just done so well. It really makes me curious on, like, how are they going to be able to pull it off again for season 3? But any doubt that I would have had for season 3 has kind of just been shut out the window. And season finale next week. I mean, this is it. I imagine it's going to be probably over 50 minutes long. I don't remember how long the last one was, but the last one really shocked everybody. Taika Waititi was the one who directed that, and it was very good. So this next one, I expect a lot of emotion, and I expect a little bit more about Moff Gideon. I'm pretty sure we're going to figure out more about his motives and what's going on there. But I think personally it's going to end on a cliffhanger. I think we're going to have a big cliffhanger at the end of it where we don't know where season 3 is going to go, but that makes season 3 even more enticing.
Yeah, I think we'll see more. I think we'll see more of the Dark Troopers. I mean, they set them up at this big setup at the end of the 4th episode of the season. And then all we saw them do was fly down, take Baby Yoda, and leave. Yeah. It's like you can't just do that. So I feel like they're going to use them a lot more this episode. So yeah. And also, I was right. I predicted that this episode would not show Baby Yoda.
Yeah, I remember that.
So
yeah, not a single shot. Just got mentioned a lot. That was, still a really good episode. But
yeah, so I think it just shows that it's one thing. It's a small thing that I like how obviously the biggest draw of this series is Baby Yoda because he's so cute. But the fact that they can do an episode that's still really good and not have him in the episode, I think just shows the confidence that the creators have in the directors, like the confidence that Favreau and Filoni would have in someone like Rick Famuyiwa, and the confidence they have in the characters that Cara Dune, Bill Burr's character, and the Mando himself are good enough that they can carry the show on their own, and that they don't need Baby Yoda. Obviously, you need Baby Yoda for this whole series because he's one of the biggest draws. But you can do an episode that doesn't even have him, and you can still have a really good episode. So I like the confidence the creators have in their characters.
I agree. I think this is going to be a fantastic series to see from start to finish. It
absolutely
has been it's been an amazing journey so far, and the thought that we're really only halfway there is pretty exciting to think about, and how this series is kind of what has laid the foundation for the future of the Star Wars franchise in terms of all these shows that are coming out. That's pretty much all the time we have today. I know I promised at the end, and this is our longest one yet, but we had a lot to talk about. It's been a very good one. Very active comment section, everything. Always appreciate you guys watching. I promised you at the end I would show you the thumbnail or the picture, poster, whatever we would call it, for my documentary that's coming out next Saturday. Yeah, it'll be Saturday the 19th, and it is Star Wars After George Lucas. It has been something I've been working on since May all year, and I'm excited for everyone to watch it. I hope you guys do enjoy it. It has been a very fun documentary to make. It has not been easy. I have probably spent 4 months just working on the script. I have let one person, shout out to Wyatt of Outbound Studios Entertainment, who's been a big help for my channel on Instagram. He watched a lot of it, I think about 40 minutes of it, and he really enjoyed it. So it will be done by 19th, and if I can get it out a few days earlier, I will, but I'll put it up as like a members only kind of thing. If anyone wants to sign up for that and watch it early, you can. So check that out on the 19th. Should go live on, what time would it be? 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and noon if you're in Central Time. So that's all I have in the works for the next week or so. You got anything for us, Goldman?
No, I've been on a hiatus other than doing reaction streams because it's finals week for me. So yeah, I haven't been uploading, but I'll definitely be. I don't want to say definitely. I'll probably do a watch party for your documentary. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It's the least I could do for you, and I think it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to watching it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. If you do it at a good time for me during that day, I'll gladly hop in if you'll have me and watch it with you. I would like to see. With these things, I like seeing people's reactions. Any criticism is necessary, so I can know what to do for the next one, and any editing mistakes or any time where someone's like, "All right, this is boring now," I can know what to take out and trim for the future. So
I'm looking forward to
a lot more documentaries coming in the future. But thank you all for tuning in, man. It's been a very good stream. It's been a very good show. Thank you all for joining us here on Chatooine. We'll be here next week, and we'll probably have one more episode after that to close out the year, and possibly the first season of Chatooine. So we're going to be doing this for many years to come because it looks like Star Wars is going nowhere, but we will be probably taking a break after December and maybe starting up again in maybe February or March. So make sure you subscribe to Darth Daddy Lunga and the Goldman's channels, whose links are in the description below. I fixed the links. Don't worry about it. Can't wait to see you all again on Chatooine. But until next time, my friends, may the Force be with you always.